The judge looked directly at my mother-in-law and said, "Mrs. Harrison, this email was sent 2 days before your son's fatal accident. In it, you wrote, 'If something happens to David, those children deserve stability, not her.'"
Can you explain what you meant by that?
Linda's hands started trembling. Her expensive lawyer, the one she'd hired to destroy me, suddenly looked like he wanted to disappear. My father-in-law grabbed her arm under the table, his knuckles turning white. And me? I just sat there, watching the woman who'd cried at my husband's funeral realize that I'd known the truth all along. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The judge waited. The entire courtroom waited. That's when I knew I'd won. But let me back up because you need to understand how we got here. How the woman who once called me the daughter she never had became the person trying to steal my children. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My name is Abigail, and 6 months ago, my husband died in a car accident on a Tuesday night. One second I'm texting him about dinner. The next, police officers are at my door telling me he's gone. Just like that. I'm a widow at 32 with 2 kids to raise alone. Emma, 8 years old, and Lucas, 6. David's parents, Linda and Robert, seemed like angels during those first few weeks. They brought food, helped with the kids, held me while I cried. I actually told my sister, I don't know what I'd do without them.
Yeah.
That didn't age well. About a month after the funeral, I started noticing things. Little comments here and there. "Abigail, you look exhausted. Are the kids too much for you? Lucas mentioned you forgot his lunchbox again yesterday. Don't you think Emma's been watching too much TV lately?" I thought they were just concerned grandparents. I was grieving, overwhelmed, doing my best to hold everything together while my world was falling apart. Of course, I wasn't perfect, but I was trying. God, I was trying so hard. Then, 3 months after I'd buried my husband, a man in a suit knocked on my door and handed me an envelope. Inside was a court summons. Linda and Robert were suing me for full custody of my children. I read the words over and over, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the paper. They called me emotionally unstable, neglectful, unfit to provide a safe environment. They wanted to take Emma and Lucas away from me.
Permanently.
The 2 people who'd hugged me at David's funeral, who'd promised to always be there for our family, were now trying to destroy me. And here's the part that made my blood run cold. They'd been planning this the entire time. They were just waiting for the right moment to strike. But they made one fatal mistake. I found David's laptop. And what I discovered in those emails changed everything. I couldn't breathe. I stood in my kitchen, staring at that court document, and I literally couldn't catch my breath. They were accusing me of being a bad mother.
Me.
The woman who hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since David died, because I was making sure my kids felt safe and loved. I called a lawyer immediately. Her name was Rebecca, and the first thing she said to me was, "Abigail, I need you to understand something. They've hired Thomas Brennan, one of the best family lawyers in the state. If they've filed this petition, they believe they can win."
Win?
Win what? My children weren't a prize. They were my babies. But over the next 2 weeks, I started to see just how deep this went. Linda and Robert had been documenting everything. Every single time I looked tired at school pickup. Every playdate I'd had to cancel because I was working late. Every moment where I'd cried in front of the kids or raised my voice out of frustration. They'd turn my grief into a case file. They even had witness statements. My neighbor, Carol, who I'd had coffee with just last week, had apparently told their lawyer that she'd heard the children crying late at night and that I seemed overwhelmed and distracted. Of course, I was overwhelmed. My husband had just died, but they made it sound like I was dangerous, like I was putting Emma and Lucas at risk just by existing. And then I found out the worst part. They'd been talking to my kids, telling them how much easier things would be if they stayed at Grandma and Grandpa's house more often. How they'd have their own rooms, new toys, less stress. They were poisoning my children against me, making them think I couldn't handle being their mom. Emma had even asked me one night, "Mommy, are you sad all the time?" Grandma says maybe we should stay with her more so you can rest. My 8-year-old was worried about me because Linda had planted that seed in her head. I felt like I was drowning. Rebecca sat me down and said, "We need evidence, Abigail. Hard evidence. Because right now, it's your word against theirs, and they've got a head start." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had become a courtroom battle for my own kids. I kept replaying every moment since David's death, every interaction with Linda and Robert, trying to figure out when this had started. And then I remembered something. David's laptop. The one he'd used for work. I'd boxed it up after he died, because I couldn't bear to look at it. But now, maybe there was something there. Some clue about why his parents hated me so much. I went to the garage at 2 a.m, found the box, and opened his laptop. What I found made my stomach drop. There were emails.
Dozens of them.
And what Linda had written, it was so much worse than I ever imagined. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely scroll through the emails. The first one was from 8 months before David died. Linda had written to him, "David, I love Abigail, but she's too independent. She doesn't listen to advice. The children need structure, tradition, guidance, not her modern ideas about parenting." David had defended me. He'd written back, "Mom, Abigail is an amazing mother. The kids are happy and healthy. Please stop." But she didn't stop. Email after email, month after month, Linda kept pushing. She questioned every decision I made. She called me stubborn and reckless. She even suggested to David that maybe he should consider giving her and Robert legal guardianship just in case something happened.
Just in case something happened.
Those words made my blood run cold. And then I found the final email, sent just 2 days before David's accident. "If something ever happens to you, David, those children deserve better. They deserve stability.
Real family.
Not her." I sat in that garage for hours, reading every single email. My hands were trembling, tears streaming down my face, but this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. Linda had never supported me. She'd never been the loving grandmother she pretended to be. She'd been plotting against me from the beginning, just waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, she was using my husband's death, her own son's death, as an opportunity to take my children. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me. I forwarded every single email to Rebecca at 3 a.m. She called me back within an hour, and I could hear the shock in her voice. "Abigail, this is it. This proves premeditation. This proves their custody claim isn't about your fitness as a mother, it's about control. About a vendetta. Can we use this in court?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Oh, we're absolutely using this in court. But Abigail, we need more. We need to show the judge that you're not just innocent. We need to prove you're an excellent mother. We need documentation, witnesses, evidence that contradicts everything they've said about you." "Then that's exactly what I'll give you," I said. And that's when I went to war. Over the next 4 weeks, I documented everything. I requested records from the kids' school showing their grades, their attendance, their behavior reports. All excellent. I got letters from their teachers describing me as an involved, caring parent who always showed up. I collected medical records showing every checkup, every vaccination, every time I'd taken them to the doctor when they were sick. I photographed every meal I cooked, every bedtime story I read, every soccer game I attended. I kept a detailed journal of everything I did as a mother. Wake-up times, breakfast menus, homework sessions, bedtime routines, everything. I even started recording conversations with Linda and Robert. And sure enough, within days, Linda made a thinly veiled threat about what's best for the children and how the courts will see the truth. But the real breakthrough came when I installed a hidden camera in my living room. Because 3 days later, Robert let himself into my house. And what he did next gave me exactly the ammunition I needed. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon. The camera caught everything. Robert walked into my house using the spare key I'd given them months ago, back when I still trusted them. He went straight to my home office and started going through my mail, opening drawers, looking through files on my desk, searching for something, anything he could use against me. He even opened my laptop and tried to access it, but it was password protected. The whole thing was on video.
Clear as day.
I sent the footage to Rebecca immediately. "This is trespassing," she said, "and attempted illegal search. Abigail, they're making this easy for us. They're so confident they're going to win that they're getting sloppy."
Good, I said.
Let them be sloppy. Rebecca and I spent the next 2 weeks building an airtight case. We organized every document, every photo, every email into a timeline that would show Judge Martinez exactly who Linda and Robert really were. Not just since David's death, but for years. The pattern of control, the manipulation, the obsession with undermining me as a mother and taking over my family. We rehearsed my testimony over and over. Rebecca threw every possible question at me, preparing me for the worst attacks Brennan would launch. "He's going to try to break you down," she warned. "He's going to bring up every mistake you've made, every moment of weakness. You need to be ready." "I'm ready," I told her. And I meant it, because this wasn't just about winning a court case anymore. This was about protecting my children from people who saw them as possessions, who saw me as an obstacle to be removed. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. But it wasn't because I was scared. It was because I couldn't wait to see their faces when the truth came out. I also did something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I sat down with Emma and Lucas and gently explained what was happening. I told them that Grandma and Grandpa wanted them to live with them full-time and that we were going to court to decide what was best. I didn't want to scare them, but I also didn't want them to be blindsided if they heard something at school or from someone else. Emma looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "But Mom, I don't want to leave you. I want to stay home with you." Lucas climbed into my lap and wrapped his little arms around my neck. "You're the best, Mommy," he whispered. That's when I knew. No matter what happened in that courtroom, I was fighting for the right thing. I was fighting for my children, for our family, for the life we'd built together. And I wasn't going to let Linda and Robert take that away from us. The next morning, I walked into that courtroom ready for war. And the look on Linda's face when she realized what I had, priceless. The courtroom was freezing, but sweat dripped down my back. Linda and Robert sat across from me with their lawyer, Thomas Brennan, who looked like he'd never lost a case in his life. Linda wore pearls and a perfectly pressed blouse, playing the concerned grandmother like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. She even smiled warmly at the judge when we walked in. Judge Martinez called the court to order, and Brennan went first. And I'll admit he was good. Really good. He painted this heartbreaking picture of two loving grandparents watching their daughter-in-law spiral after their son's tragic death. He brought up the neighbors' statements. The times I'd forgotten things. The moments I'd been too emotional in front of the children. He made me sound like I was barely holding it together, like my kids were living in chaos. I sat there, gripping the edge of the table, forcing myself not to react. Rebecca had drilled it into me. Stay calm. Don't give them anything. Let me handle it. And then it was her turn. Rebecca stood up slowly, and the first thing she did was walk straight to Judge Martinez's bench and hand her a thick folder. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "I'd like to submit evidence that this custody petition was premeditated long before the father's passing and has absolutely nothing to do with the mother's fitness to parent." Brennan shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is overruled," Judge Martinez said, already opening the folder. Yes," Linda whispered. The judge set the papers down with a heavy thud. Then Rebecca stood again. "Your Honor, I'd also like to present school records showing both children's excellent academic performance and attendance. Medical records documenting consistent, thorough health care. Letters from educators describing Mrs. Harrison as a devoted, engaged parent." She placed stack after stack of documents on the judge's bench. "And finally," Rebecca said, "video evidence of Mr. Robert Harrison illegally entering Mrs. Harrison's home and searching through her personal belongings without permission." She played the footage, right there in the courtroom. Robert walking through my house like he owned it, going through my mail, opening drawers, violating my privacy. Brennan tried to object 3 separate times. Judge Martinez shut him down every single time. Then Rebecca called me to the stand. I testified for nearly an hour. I talked about the grief, yes, but I also talked about the strength it took to wake up every morning and make breakfast for my kids, even when I didn't want to get out of bed. About reading bedtime stories through tears because I wanted Emma and Lucas to feel safe. About going to therapy to process my trauma in a healthy way so I could be the best mother possible. I wasn't falling apart. I was surviving. And I was doing it for my children. When I finished, Judge Martinez looked directly at Linda and Robert. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented today," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "And what I see here is not a concerned set of grandparents trying to protect their grandchildren. What I see is a calculated, manipulative attempt to exploit a family tragedy and a grieving mother for the purpose of control." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Custody will remain with Mrs. Abigail Harrison. Full physical and legal custody. Furthermore, I am ordering that all visitation with the paternal grandparents be supervised and limited to once per month, pending a full psychological evaluation to assess their intentions and behavior toward the minor children." Linda gasped audibly. Robert's face turned bright red. Brennan looked absolutely stunned. I sat there, completely frozen, barely able to process what I'd just heard. I'd won. I'd actually won. Rebecca squeezed my hand under the table. "It's over," she whispered. "You did it." I walked out of that courtroom, and Emma and Lucas were waiting outside with my sister. The moment they saw me, they ran straight into my arms. I hugged them so tight, I thought I'd never let go. Linda tried to approach us in the hallway. I looked her directly in the eye and said, "Stay away from my family." She opened her mouth to say something, but Robert grabbed her arm and pulled her away. That was the last time I ever spoke to them. If this story resonated with you, or if you know someone who's dealing with toxic in-laws, manipulative family members, or fighting for custody of their children, please share this video with them. Let them know they're not alone, that there are people out there who understand what they're going through. And if you made it this far, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything and helps me keep sharing these stories of survival, justice, and standing up for what's right. Drop a comment below and let me know. Have you ever dealt with toxic family members?
How did you handle it?
I read every single comment, and I love hearing your stories. Thanks for watching. And remember, never let anyone make you feel like you're not enough. You are stronger than you think. Keep fighting for what matters. I'll see you in the next one.